What if I told you that the most popular, absolutely foolproof arguments against astrology are actually attacking a version of astrology that literally nobody believes in? Well, welcome to this explainer. Today we're doing something a little bit different, kind of going on the offensive. We are going to logically deconstruct the most mainstream arguments used to supposedly debunk astrology. Now, just to be crystal clear right out of the gate, I'm not here to convince you to believe in astrology. That's not what this is about. My goal today is just to show you that the criticisms people think are absolutely airtight, yeah, they're actually full of holes. Let's get right into it.
Okay, you have definitely heard this devastating sounding takedown before. Honestly, maybe you've even used it yourself at a party. It usually goes a little something like this. Someone smugly points out that because the stars have shifted over time, the zodiac signs are entirely wrong. They hit you with the classic, well, if you think you're a Scorpio, you're actually a Libra. Sounds incredibly damning, right? It feels like an instant checkmate against the entire practice.
But here is the wild reality. Every single one of these common gotcha arguments reveals a fundamental, almost comical misunderstanding of how astrological systems actually function. For years, astrology has been dismissed with the exact same 3 or 4 arguments, repeated so often they've just kind of morphed into established scientific fact in the public mind. But when you actually look at the history, the astronomy, and the underlying philosophy, you realize pretty quickly that skeptics are loudly, proudly debunking a totally imaginary version of astrology.
So, today, we're going to play Mythbusters. We are systematically dismantling these 3 mainstream criticisms. Myth 1, shifting signs. Myth 2, unequal constellations. And Myth 3, arbitrary origins.
All right, let's dive right into our very first one. Myth 1, shifting signs.
To really get what the skeptics are arguing here, we have to talk about the precession of the equinoxes. Now, this is a very real, well-documented astronomical phenomenon. Basically, the Earth has a slight wobble on its axis, and that wobble causes the equinoctial point to drift roughly 1 degree about every 72 years. Critics love pointing to this real physical drift to claim that the zodiac signs have fundamentally shifted out of alignment. But here's the catch, and it's a big one. They are entirely conflating 2 completely different zodiac systems.
The whole confusion stems from smushing together 2 totally distinct frameworks. First up, you have the tropical system, which is what the vast majority of Western astrology uses. The tropical system is anchored to the vernal equinox, that moment in spring when day and night are perfectly equal. It tracks the sun's declination cycle, which is what gives us our seasons. It has absolutely nothing to do with the physical constellations in the sky. Zero. On the flip side, you have the sidereal system, which is heavily used in Vedic astrology. Now, this system actually is anchored to the physical backdrop of the stars. So let's break down why the skeptics' argument completely falls apart here. Tropical astrologers already know all about the precession. They actively account for it by staying anchored to the equinox instead of the stars. And sidereal astrologers, well, they use a totally different reference point to track the actual stars, and they never claim to follow the equinox in the first place. So ultimately, this big, devastating criticism, it just destroys a straw man. It doesn't lay a finger on actual astrology.
Which brings us to our next point. Myth 2, unequal constellations.
So once you explain the whole tropical versus sidereal thing to a skeptic, they almost always pivot to this second myth. They attack the sidereal system itself. They'll tell you with absolute confidence, look up at the night sky. The physical constellations are wildly different sizes. Scorpius is tiny, but Virgo is absolutely enormous. So they ask, how on earth can the sidereal system chop the sky up into neat, perfectly equal 30-degree astrological signs? It's completely inaccurate, right? Well, I actually love this argument because it accidentally highlights something super fascinating about the true history of these systems.
To completely dismantle that size argument, we just have to ask one simple question. What came first, the constellation drawings or the mathematical division? Spoiler alert, the math came first. Think of it like cutting a pie. Step 1. Ancient astronomers observed a 12-fold pattern in the ecliptic. That's the path the sun traces across our sky. Step 2, long before anyone standardized the drawings of the constellations, they mathematically divided this path into 12 equal 30-degree slices. Step 3, only after that mathematical grid was laid down did they name those slices. They just borrowed the names of whatever constellations happened to be hanging out in that general neighborhood of the sky at the time. So, you see the constellations? They are literally just the labels. They are not the structural foundation of the system. Literally nobody in astrology is out there claiming that the physical grouping of stars that makes up Scorpius is exactly 30 degrees wide.
It's just a mathematical slice of the sky that happens to share a name with the nearby stars. Shouting, "Gotcha! The physical stars are different sizes," completely misses the point of what a sign actually is in this framework.
Okay, moving right along to the big one. Myth 3, arbitrary origins.
Now, I'll admit, this is probably the most sophisticated challenge skeptics throw at the sidereal system. Even if they accept the 30-degree math we just talked about, they'll hit you with a totally fair question. Okay, but why start there? They argue that picking a starting point for the zodiac is entirely made up. Like, it's just a circle, right? You could theoretically start it anywhere. It sounds like a rock-solid point. But the historical answer is surprisingly deep and deeply cosmological.
To understand this, we have to look at a remarkable text from the late 19th century called the Holy Science. It was written by an Indian sage named Sri Yukteswar, and in it, he lays out a framework that tackles this arbitrary starting point argument head-on. He details this incredibly vast cosmological structure, drawing on traditions that literally predate modern astronomy by thousands of years.
Right at the core of Yukteswar's framework is this massive number, 24,000. He argues that our entire solar system, the sun, the planets, the whole shebang, is actually engaged in a dual orbital motion around another stellar center. According to his work, it takes exactly 24,000 years to complete one massive galactic cycle. And even wilder, he argues that it's this exact 24,000-year cycle that actually causes that precession of the equinoxes we were talking about earlier.
So, returning to the question, where does the zodiac start? Well, according to this framework, the moment the autumnal equinox aligns with the first point of sidereal Aries, that marks our solar system's absolute closest approach to the grand center of the Milky Way galaxy. Think about that for a second. The origin point isn't random at all. It is mathematically tied to a massive 24,000-year cosmological cycle. When skeptics roll their eyes and claim the starting point is just pulled out of thin air, it turns out there's this highly sophisticated, internally consistent logic there. They just haven't dug deep enough into the research to actually find it.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, let's take a quick look back. We have systematically busted 3 of the most popular, supposedly undeniable debunking arguments out there: shifting signs, unequal constellations, and arbitrary origins. Here's the TLDR of what you should take away from all this. First, the signs haven't magically shifted out of alignment because tropical astrology tracks the seasons while sidereal tracks the stars. They're 2 different tools for 2 different jobs. Second, the mismatched sizes of the physical constellations don't matter at all because the 30-degree math came first. The stars were literally just convenient labels. And third, the sidereal origin point isn't just some random spot in the sky, it perfectly aligns with a 24,000-year galactic orbit. So the very next time someone smugly brings up these criticisms as obvious facts, you can confidently let them know that they just haven't done their homework. By looking closely at the source material, it becomes pretty undeniable that these ancient systems possess an internal logic that is way more durable and way more complex than the mainstream ever gives them credit for. And honestly, it leaves us with a deeply provocative thought. If the loudest critics completely misunderstand even the most basic mechanics of how these frameworks operate, what other fascinating insights might remain hidden away, just waiting to be uncovered by anyone actually willing to look? Thanks for joining me on this explainer today, and as always, keep questioning the easy answers.